Hey, welcome back to another episode of the 938 podcast. My name is Craig Stevenson, and I'm an associate mission director here for the BBFI Mission Office in Springfield, Missouri. And we're coming to you live here at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning, 938 podcast. I want to encourage you to go click like and subscribe to our podcast as we are here every week talking about BBFI missions and what's going on around the world, talking about the need for more missionaries and all kinds of different things. And today we have the privilege of having Levi and Chelsea Wilson with us. So welcome to the podcast. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good.
Doing good.
Yeah.
We just got done with our AMT, Advanced Mission Training, our sessions, and that was online, and we're ready.
Oh yeah, I love that. You know, we were actually here on the podcast talking about that a couple of weeks ago, talking about the advanced mission training and that process and what that looks like and what our missionaries go through and all that. So you guys have just gone through that. So I tell you what, since we're talking about that, let's just go ahead. So how did that go? What did you think of the advanced mission training process?
It was a lot different.
It was a different experience for sure, wasn't it?
But it was actually the exact same experience that we've only known.
True.
Yeah, that's true. So for our viewers, you may not know, if you watch the podcast that Brian Garrison, Steve Bender, and myself were on talking about advanced mission training, we were planning on having everything in person, right?
Yeah.
But COVID,
we were excited.
You know,
about
that's kind of the standard saying these days is but COVID, and so we had to go online with a lot of our sessions and just had to make some last minute changes and adjustments. But that was still good. Still had our training, and everyone did a great job walking through that. So I tell you what, before we jump into a whole lot else, let's just go ahead and say, hey, give us a little bit of information about you guys. So tell us. Number one, who you are. We know your names because I just told everybody, right? But give us some background, where you're from, where are you going? You know, where has God called you to? What does that look like? So we'll just start with Levi and just let you kind of walk us through that a little bit.
Sure. I grew up here in Springfield, Missouri. Went to Cherry Street Baptist Church. I've been going there my whole life, and we going to Cherry Street. We had a bunch of missionaries coming and going, and it's really cool to see all the missionaries that would come in and they would go out. And that's where I was kind of first introduced to missions, even as a little guy. And so growing up at Cherry Street, it was pretty awesome because I got to see two different pastors. But at the same time, we've only had two different pastors. So that has been pretty incredible. So I grew up at Cherry Street, and that's where I started to have a passion for missions and helped out in the youth and the bus ministry and just God was kind of working in my heart throughout my whole life there at Cherry Street. And what happened was I decided, I kind of wanted to do things on my own, so I went to OTC for a while, and this is going to get my associate's degree and then maybe move on to something like business and marketing or something like that. And then, God was really working on my heart in that time frame. And it's like, well, okay, I'll go to BBC for 1 year and then show everybody and myself that, that's not what God wants for me.
Yeah, sure.
And then continue on. But started with Mike Escobel. And we started going to BBC at the same time, and halfway through the first year, the school did a play on Bob Hughes' life and ministry of missionary Bob Hughes, and then throughout that the play, God continued to work in my heart and said, you know what, this is what I want you to do. I don't want you to be Bob Hughes, but I want you to follow after and how I was leading him to lead people to Christ and how he was able to talk to people who'd never heard before. Sure. And I want you to do the same thing somewhere else. So that's after the play ended, they had an invitation, and I went forward to surrender my life to be a missionary.
Wow, that's really cool. It's cool how we hear stories like the life of Bob Hughes and all of our missionaries. I mean, we have all kinds of missionaries and story after story after story. And it's amazing how certain stories, when we hear them, it just sparks an interest or a deeper interest maybe that God uses in our lives to call us into missions and make that known to us. And so I love what you say, though, because you talked about being in Cherry Street, growing up there, even as a little kid, being taught missions. And let me ask you this, and just kind of go back to the importance, because you talked about always having missionaries come through Cherry Street. Talk to me about the importance for you of having missionaries come through churches, as a little kid in church and as a teenager in church and even in college ministry and things like that. What was it like for you hearing all of these missionaries coming through on a regular basis?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because that is part of my testimony as well. Because when you're a younger person and you're growing up in church and seeing all these missionaries come through, you start to think, wow, these missionaries are some kind of a superstars, or you hear about all the different stories that they're talking about and all the different adventures and all the amazing things God's doing in them and through them in their country. And so at first you're like, wow, these people they're something.
Yeah.
And then growing up a little bit more, I saw the missionaries come back through, and then other missionaries come through, and got to talk to them a little bit more and got to get to know them more, and started to realize, these missionaries are maybe not as super as I thought they were.
Yeah.
They're just ordinary people, just like me, just like Chelsea, just like you, and everybody else out there that's watching this. They're just like just like us.
They're just like regular people that just simply said, you know what, God, if you can use my life, I'm going to surrender it to you to go wherever you want me to go. And God revealed a place to them, and they surrendered and they went. And then we see plays about missionaries like that in Bible college or wherever. We hear stories. We've been putting together this documentary on the life of Marjorie Browning, one of our single lady missionaries down in Brazil, and we get to tell stories like that. And it's really cool how God uses all those stories in our life, just across the board, to really stir up a bit more of a burden for missions. And so you went to BBC with the purpose of going a year to tell everybody, yeah, this ain't for me. This isn't for me at all. But that didn't happen. We know Bob Hughes. So is that where you guys met? No. Okay. So I'm going to let Chelsea tell us this story, because it's always more interesting when we hear it from the wife, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So look, so where did you grow up? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us a little bit about how you guys met.
Okay. Yeah, I grew up in St. Charles, Missouri.
Okay.
So I did not move to Springfield until 2008 with my family. We came here we were looking for a house to do a Christian marriage retreat, but it was going to look like a bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
So that's why we moved here in the first place. But growing up for me, I thought missionaries were celebrities. We didn't see them.
Yeah.
I know of one missionary that came into our church, but when they came, it was a big deal because they were the only ones that we knew. So I grew up knowing about missionaries, but not really associating myself as being a missionary. It's something I could ever achieve. And then we moved here, and missionaries were my friends. Yeah. I was in a church where we had all kinds of missionaries coming and going.
Yeah, that's cool.
And that's when I started to realize they were regular people.
Yeah.
And, anyone, we're all missionaries, whether we're here in Springfield or outlying cities or across the world. We need to tell people about Jesus.
Yeah, that's right.
And so going to Cherry Street in 2008 is when Levi and I met.
Okay.
And we were friends for a long time.
Yeah.
And there will be, Levi will say that we didn't date for a long time, but we probably went on 3 dates before we finally made it official.
Nice.
It's like, oh, those weren't dates. I'm like, when two people go out together and no one else is around.
It's a date. Yeah, that's right. So I like the look on your face. Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. So
anyway, we met there. We did ministry together at Cherry Street before we were even dating. And then God just continued to bring our paths in line, and we were both called to be missionaries before we were ever dating. And we both knew that Levi had a calling to China originally, actually. And then when we got engaged, he said, we need to pray about where God is calling us as a married couple, because I know I was called to China as a single missionary, but I don't know where we are called together. So we prayed about that for since we got engaged, and then our first year of marriage, we prayed about it. And then it was our 1 year anniversary. We were at church, And I was like, Levi, we just need to go and tell the church family that we're going to China.
Yeah.
I was like, God has not given us a clear direction on anywhere else to go.
Yeah.
So we went forward that night and we surrendered to China. And then 2 months later, our pastor, Dennis Jennings, he came to us at our missions conference and he said, so I've been praying about a couple to go to a specific place.
Nice.
And every time I pray, you guys come to mind.
Yeah.
So I feel like I need to tell you about this.
You need to at least mention it to you and talk with you about it. That's really cool.
So he told us about South Sudan, and he
Yeah.
told us about all the ministries that were taking place, and he told us about the missionaries that were there, Ron and Christine Enoch, and how their health wasn't allowing them to stay on the field.
Yeah, sure.
So we didn't say anything for 9 months. We just prayed about it.
Yeah.
We tried to, kind of balance it out, like not talk about it together, pray
sure.
about it individually, pray about it together, do our own research.
Yeah.
And God just continued to make it clear that South Sudan is where he was calling us to go to be
Yeah.
missionaries.
And now fast forward to today, and we've got done with our advanced mission training, and now you're headed out to finish raise and support and hopefully go to the field. So, and I love that. I love the stories behind how God worked all the details out to get you to the point where you're getting ready to go to the field. And I tell you what, I've been there. My parents were missionaries to Romania, and then I was a single missionary through the short-term program back in 2001, raising support, going to the mission field. And I remember what it was like getting ready to go and the excitement that's there, but also the nerves and what that looks like. And so let whoever wants to answer this, doesn't matter. So walk me through some of the thoughts of what it's like getting ready to go to the mission field to live, especially in a place like South Sudan, because it's not like you have a Walmart on every corner, right? In South Sudan and most places in the world, right? So walk me through some of those thoughts that go through your mind as you're talking through things and you're getting ready to go. Obviously, you got to set up housing, you got to set up vehicles, all of that kind of stuff. So walk me through some of that kind of process.
You taking this or am I?
Go for it.
Okay.
All right.
Well, it's funny what you said because we go to churches and they start looking at South Sudan on Google Maps and they're like, oh, South Sudan has a Jack in the Box. And we're like, I don't know why that's on there, but they definitely don't.
Kind of Wendy's and all kinds of places.
Yeah.
But we are very blessed because all of the ministry has been laid out for us, and we, of course, we want to go plant more churches, but for starting out, it's such a blessing to have this property where it's a compound where we'll do all the ministry. We have housing there.
Awesome.
Ron and Christine,
that's great.
Yeah, they retrofitted shipping containers into living quarters.
Okay.
So we've actually already stayed in those when we went to South Sudan the first time. It's a little different because you've got this like breezeway between your bedroom and your kitchen.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Get up in the morning to go get some coffee, and you're walking through your little breezeway to
That's awesome.
get
Yeah,
coffee.
very cool.
It's different, but we actually have been very blessed. Churches have been giving money so we can build a ministry house. So that will be something in the works later.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So you talk about ministry. So Levi, tell me a little bit more about the ministry that's there. So we were talking before we got started. You were kind of walking me through some of the things that have been started, and we know the Enochs have done such a great job there in building relationships, developing, just the infrastructure to be able to have ministry and do ministry there, and obviously health-related issues. You guys are going in to carry that on. So what does that look like when you get in from a ministry perspective? What all is going? What are you wanting to do? And how are you going to continue what the Enochs have already done?
Yeah, it's super exciting when we get there because, like you said, the Enochs have already put so much infrastructure into place. They've got a feeding center which feeds malnourished kids. I think it's 94 to about 105 a week.
Wow.
And there's the well. We've got a well on the property that gives water to the community.
Oh, that's huge.
And then we have a secondary school, or what we would call a high school here in the States. And all three of those ministries are ran through the most important one, which is the Bible Baptist Church of South Sudan.
Very cool.
Recently, there's been, I think, 3 people that's gotten saved in the past few weeks from the ministry that is going on, the church services, and Assistant Pastor Maury, they're continuing with the church services, and it's really awesome. And what's cool about the ministry is here in the States, we try to go out, we try to bring people in.
Yeah.
And it's like pulling teeth sometimes.
Yeah.
But over there's people coming to us on a daily basis, multiple times a day.
Wow.
So there's
that's
people coming,
really cool.
Yeah. There's people coming to us on the well we get to share the gospel with. There's people coming to the feeding center, the moms and the kids. We got the school. 2 out of the 7 teachers that we have accepted Jesus as their Savior.
Are you serious? Wow.
Of the school.
Man,
So.
isn't that incredible? And I love it because you talk about those that are saved here in the last few weeks. I mean, that's in spite of COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, you take a look at the COVID restrictions just around the world, and it, there's so many different layers to that conversation. But it's really pretty cool to look out and know that church is still going on, church is still happening, people are still getting saved in spite of this global pandemic that we've had going on. And so that's really cool. You think about the Enochs being back, the ministry still going, and I'm excited for you guys and what that looks like. So walk me through this. So what's the timeline? Do you have any kind of a timeline on what it looks like on when you're hoping to get to the field?
Our goal has been to be on the field by the end of the year.
By the end of this year?
By the end of this year.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome.
It seemed to be a lofty goal for myself and Chelsea, and she's definitely more spiritual than I am, so she was like, oh, yeah, we can do that.
Wow, that's funny.
But, God is blessed in more ways than we could ever imagine, and we're at 57% out of our support.
Okay.
Just officially starting in January of this year.
Of this year.
So God's blessings. So.
I tell you what, that's a long way down the deputation trail in a very short amount of time as far as the amount that you've raised. So, look, if you're just joining us today on the 938 podcast, we got Levi and Chelsea Wilson, BBFI Missionaries to the country of South Sudan, going to do a wonderful work, picking up right where the Enochs have left off and the things that the Enochs are doing over there, and going to be working with that ministry, and excited about that. So I tell you all of that to say this. Yeah, if you're looking for a great missionary to take on that's going to do an incredible work, I want to encourage you to take on Levi and Chelsea Wilson as they're getting ready to go to South Sudan, because yeah, absolutely. And that's okay for you to absolutely. Oh, yeah. So, because I'll tell you, God's got a great work going on in South Sudan. And I know he wants you there. We're excited for you guys. We're behind you, looking forward to you getting there. We're praying for you. And I know there's a lot of churches out there that are praying for you guys as well. And so if you got open dates, do you have any open dates between now and the end of the year that you're trying to fill?
We've got some time in November and December.
Okay.
We've got all of our other Sundays booked. I think we have some Sunday evenings. And we do have some Wednesdays available as well. Okay,
so there you go. So if you want to have a missionary come in and talk about the ministry in South Sudan, who would do an incredible job challenging your people for missions, I want to encourage you to get in contact with Levi and Chelsea. So let's do one other thing before we wrap up here. Man, just appreciate you guys coming on. But thinking about South Sudan, how many other BBFI missionaries do we have in South Sudan?
0.
None. Okay. So I'm going to put you on the spot. I did not tell you I was going to ask you this because, quite honestly, it just came to my mind. So we'll just go ahead and ask it anyway. How many people are in South Sudan, roughly?
In the country? Like
in the country, yeah, just the population of the country.
11 million people.
So we have 11 million people in the country of South Sudan.
Yes.
We have the ministry that's going on. That's really an incredible ministry and a lot of great things going on. But the truth is, we need more missionaries in South Sudan.
Yes,
absolutely.
We do.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So what would you tell to the person that's out here watching this podcast right now that says, I'm considering being a missionary, I'm praying about it, or maybe they're not even considering or praying about it, but they're willing to say, God, if you want me to go, I'll go. What would you say to those people that are watching about the need in South Sudan and just by encouragement of having them pray about that? What would you say, Levi?
We would definitely take all our prayers that we can get for the ministry in South Sudan, because there's 11 million people in South Sudan, and there's 500,000 people in Juba, in the capital city, that we're going to be ministering to.
Wow.
And we can't do it alone, and Maury and Peter, they can't do it alone, and Bible Baptist Church of South Sudan can't do it alone.
Yeah.
So we need all the prayers and the financial support to help us to get there. But we also need people to come with us.
We also need people.
So what I would encourage those that are thinking about becoming a missionary or thinking about getting into ministry is to wherever you are right at this moment, start getting plugged in at your church. start helping in whatever
stuff.
Ministry that you feel like you could take a hold of yourself, and whether it's in the youth ministry or your maybe an RU program that you have, or your visitation program that you have at church. Our pastor always says it's easier to move a steering, or it's easier to drive a steering or a moving car than it is a parked car.
A parked one, that's right. Yeah,
there you go. That's
good.
About that.
No, that's okay.
But,
you're good. Yeah.
The point is,
we get the point.
You're going down. It's easier to maneuver when you're actually moving.
Oh yeah.
So God can use
that's
this,
good stuff right there.
So.
Yeah. So if you're out there and you're considering being a missionary, you're praying about, hey God, what do you want me to do? Number one, pray and be open to saying, God, if you want me to go to South Sudan or to any mission field, I'm willing to go. We're in the middle of this Project 938 this year, leading into 938 Sunday. And that's the whole point of Project 938 is pray the Lord of the harvest. He'd send forth more laborers into his harvest, right? Yeah. Matthew 9:38, prayer request from Jesus. And so we're just continuing that conversation as we go through these podcast episodes, because we think it's really important for our missionaries to get their stories out, because we never know when someone might hear your story, just like you heard the story of Bob Hughes, and that might make an impact, and God uses that to call someone to the mission field. And then throughout that process, we also think it's important for all of us to rally around the idea of praying for this prayer request that Jesus gave us for more laborers. And so we're behind you. We're praying for you. If you want more information on Project 938, go to project938.world, and you can get more information about there. If your church is signed up, that's awesome. If it hasn't, go and register today, because there's a ton of resources that you're going to get as a registered church for Project 938. And then if you're out there and you're interested in becoming a missionary, go to bbfimissions.com, and you can get all the information you need there to contact us. And then we'd love to visit with you and help you walk down that path that God has for you in your life that leads you to the mission field, just like he's led Levi and Chelsea. And I tell you, it's great to have you on today. As we kind of wrap up, are there any last thoughts that you have, or anything that you'd like to tell our viewers today?
Well, just as you've been talking, I've been thinking about how I didn't give my full testimony, but I went to go to culinary school. I went to go be a nutritionist, and it was my senior year of college when it was almost I could not do anything but go forward and surrender to be a missionary. Yeah. So it may not make sense wherever you're at.
Yeah.
It may not make sense I have not gone to Bible college. How am I going to go be a missionary somewhere? Yeah. But that's not what God asks us to do to make sense of what he calls us to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He asks us to be willing.
Be
faithful.
And be faithful and surrender. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know when I was at Cherry Street is when I surrendered to be a missionary, and no one knew I was going forward that night. And I remember my pastor saying, well, I'm not surprised that she came up here, because it was exactly what Levi said. You cannot move a parked car, but if you're being faithful and you're doing ministry, God's going to direct you to what he's calling you to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just be faithful.
And I love that, because, I mean, let's face it, God doesn't necessarily just call the Bible college student that walks through and in their senior year of college, he calls them to the mission field so they can step right into that process. I mean, we have people in our churches. My dad was pastoring in Houston, Texas, back in the early 90s, and had been a pastor for years, right, in Texas, when they came in and said, hey, we feel like God's calling us to go to Romania. And so it may be a pastor, it may be someone in culinary school, or whatever the situation is, or whatever line of school studies or even job paths or career paths. Yeah. God can use you if you're willing. So if you're watching, that's one thing that would be really good for you to take heart in and take hold of today. Wherever you're at, God can't really use a parked car, and I love that. I'm gonna have to use that from now on. But he can't use a parked car, but it's easy to steer a vehicle that's moving. And so move in ministry the way that God wants you to, and the way that we know that he wants us to get involved, and then be open to allow him to divert our path where he wants us to go. And we're just praying that he diverts a lot of people to the mission field.
Into South Sudan.
Into South Sudan, that's right, into South Sudan. So, Levi, anything that you'd add to this before we get out of here today?
No, I think we covered it all, other than just like Chelsea was saying, trust and obey. We don't have to make heads or tails of it, but we just need to trust and obey what God's calling, and do what we know to do. It's hard to know God's will for our life, But the things that we do know, are we acting on them?
Yeah, and then he directs us from there. And I love, we don't always know how that's going to be, but he does, and he can make that abundantly clear in our lives, and that's really cool. Levi, Chelsea, thanks for being here with us today on the 938 podcast. Again, if you're joining us today, go click like and subscribe on the podcast and stay up to date on all future episodes of the 938 podcast. Thanks for being here today. Pray for Levi and Chelsea. If you're a church that's looking for a great young couple to support, go into an incredible field with a lot of opportunity, I want to encourage you to take on Levi and Chelsea, or get a hold of them and invite them to come be with you in your church. And I know they'll be a blessing to your people there in your church. You guys, again, thanks for coming. And if you're watching, we'll see you next week right here on the 938 podcast.
Thank you.